A tiny, scruffy puppy sleeps outside the hospital every night, rain or shine, drawing the attention of a compassionate doctor. Initially, people assume it's just a stray looking for warmth. But when the doctor investigates why the puppy refuses to leave, he discovers a heartbreaking secret tied to the hospital itself. This revelation brings tears to his eyes and changes his perspective on love and loyalty forever. What could the puppy be waiting for? Stay with us to uncover this heart-wrenching story. Welcome to our video. My name is Mark, and today, we're diving into a story that will warm your heart and tug at your emotions. Have you ever witnessed an animal's loyalty and wondered about its story? What if a puppy's actions held a secret that no one could have imagined? Let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. I'd love to know. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, give this video a like, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss an emotional story like this. Let's jump in. It was a chilly evening, and the city hospital bustled with its usual chaos. Doctors hurried from one patient to the next, families anxiously waited for updates, and the hum of life-saving machines filled the air. Amidst all this activity, there was one unusual sight outside the hospital gates: a scruffy, brown puppy curled up on a thin piece of cardboard. Every night, without fail, the puppy was there. Rain, cold, or heat, it never left its spot near the main entrance. Its small body trembled in the cold, but it seemed unfazed. Hospital staff occasionally threw it scraps of food, and kind patients would leave bits of bread or biscuits. Some even offered it a warm blanket, but the puppy always seemed uninterested. It ate only enough to stay alive, then quietly resumed its position, staring at the large glass doors of the hospital. Dr. Ethan Carter, a young and compassionate doctor known for his gentle bedside manner, noticed the puppy during one of his late-night shifts. Ethan had always been a dog lover, and the sight of the forlorn creature tugged at his heartstrings. Why does it stay here every night? He wondered aloud as he stood at the entrance, watching the little dog curl into a ball. "Must be a stray duck," said the security guard, adjusting his cap. "It's been here for weeks now. People feed it, but it doesn't trust anyone enough to come closer." Ethan frowned, his curiosity piqued. Stray dogs were common in the city, but there was something unusual about this one. It wasn't scavenging for food or shelter, it seemed to be waiting for something. One evening, as his shift ended, Ethan decided to approach the puppy. He crouched down a few feet away, holding out a piece of bread. "Hey there, little buddy," he said softly, his voice calm and inviting. The puppy looked at him with soulful, brown eyes but didn't move. "Come on, it's okay," Ethan coaxed, inching closer. Just as he thought he was making progress, the puppy barked sharply and darted off toward the alley beside the hospital. Ethan stood there, puzzled. "What are you running from?" he murmured. The next day, Ethan brought a small bowl of chicken broth, hoping to win the puppy's trust. Once again, the little dog stared at him but refused to come closer. The pattern repeated itself over several nights. Ethan noticed something odd. The puppy never ventured far from the hospital, but it also never let anyone get too close. It was as though it had a purpose, a reason for being there. One rainy evening, Ethan stood under the awning, watching the puppy shiver in the downpour. He couldn't take it anymore. Grabbing an umbrella, he rushed outside and placed it over the puppy. The little dog barked in protest, then scampered into the shadows of the alley. Frustrated but determined, Ethan followed, his footsteps splashing through puddles. At the end of the narrow alley, the puppy stopped abruptly, its small body tense. It began digging at a pile of rubble with surprising urgency. Ethan stood frozen, the rain soaking through his scrubs. "What are you doing?" he whispered. As the puppy unearthed a torn child's shoe, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Why was it digging here? And what was the story behind the shoe? Dr. Ethan stared at the muddy, torn shoe in disbelief. The small, worn-out sneaker seemed too significant to be just a random find. The puppy barked again, pawing at the ground as if urging him to look closer. Ethan crouched down, his fingers brushing against the damp earth. his mind raced with questions. "Who did this belong to?" he murmured. The puppy whined softly, sitting down beside the pile of rubble. For the first time, it seemed calm, as though its frantic digging had a purpose, and now it was waiting for Ethan to understand. Ethan picked up the shoe, examining it under the dim light from the hospital's back door. It was a child's shoe, no larger than the size of his palm, with frayed laces and a faded cartoon character on the side. As the rain continued to pour, Ethan's thoughts spiraled. He had worked at the hospital for over a year, yet he couldn't recall hearing about a child connected to a stray puppy. But then again, the hospital served countless patients every day. Determined to find answers, Ethan placed the shoe in his bag and returned to his office. The next day, Ethan approached the hospital's janitor, Mr. Wallace, a man who had worked there for decades and knew everything that went on within its walls. "Hey, Mr. Wallace," Ethan began cautiously, holding out the shoe. "Do you recognize this?" The old man squinted at the shoe, his face clouding with recognition. "That's strange," he muttered. "That looks like the shoe of a boy I used to see around here months ago. Poor kid. He was always playing outside with that dog of his." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "A boy? Do you know what happened to him?" Mr. Wallace sighed, leaning on his mop. "He was homeless. Used to come around with his dog, just sitting outside the hospital, waiting for scraps. A car hit him one day right outside the gates. It was a mess. They rushed him in here, but he didn't make it." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. "And the dog? It must be the same one." "That little thing never left his side," Mr. Wallace replied. "Even after the boy died, it stayed here. I guess it's still waiting for him to come back." Ethan looked out the window toward the hospital entrance, where the puppy now lay curled up, staring at the doors as if expecting someone to walk out. The idea of the dog waiting for its young owner, oblivious to the fact that he was never coming back, was almost too much to bear. That evening, Ethan couldn't shake the image of the boy and his loyal puppy. He decided to dig deeper. Returning to the hospital's records room, he searched for reports of accidents in front of the hospital. After sifting through files for over an hour, he found what he was looking for. "Jeremy Thompson," Ethan read aloud. The report detailed the tragic accident of a 7-year-old boy who was hit by a car just outside the hospital 6 months ago. The document mentioned that he was homeless and had been accompanied by a stray dog. The medical team had tried to save him, but his injuries were too severe. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the weight of the discovery pressing down on him. The puppy wasn't just any stray, it was mourning its best friend, unable to understand that the boy it loved was gone forever. The following night, Ethan watched the puppy more closely. Its gaze never wavered from the hospital doors. What was it waiting for? And why now, after so many months, was it still clinging to this place? As Ethan pondered these questions, the puppy suddenly stood up and began barking, its small body tense and alert. Ethan rushed outside to see what had caught its attention. The puppy ran toward the alley again, this time stopping near a dumpster. It barked and whimpered, pawing at the ground. Ethan hesitated, his pulse quickening. Was there something else it wanted him to find? He crouched down and began to dig. Within moments, his fingers brushed against something metallic. Pulling it out, he realized it was an old locket, rusted but intact. He opened it carefully and found a tiny photograph inside, a picture of a boy holding the same puppy that now stood before him. The puppy barked again, as if urging him to understand. But what was it trying to tell him? Ethan held the locket tightly in his hand, the tiny photograph staring back at him. It was unmistakably Jeremy, the boy who had tragically lost his life, holding the very puppy that now refused to leave the hospital. The bond between them was evident, even in the faded image. Ethan's heart ached as he realized just how deep the puppy's loyalty ran. The puppy barked again, breaking Ethan's thoughts. It pawed at the ground as if there was more to uncover. Ethan dug a little further, but there was nothing else beneath the damp soil. "Is this what you wanted me to find?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The puppy tilted its head, its soulful eyes fixed on Ethan. For the first time, it stepped closer to him, pressing its wet nose against his hand. Ethan felt a wave of emotion wash over him. It was as if the puppy was entrusting him with something, a silent plea for help. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept the locket on his bedside table. The image of Jeremy and the puppy burned into his mind. The next morning, he decided to visit the neighborhood around the hospital to see if anyone remembered the boy. Ethan started with a nearby convenience store, showing the locket to the owner. The elderly man squinted at the photo, his expression softening. "Oh, that's Jeremy," he said. "Poor kid. He used to come by with that dog, asking for scraps. Never caused any trouble. Always polite, always smiling. Do you know where he lived?" Ethan asked. The man shook his head. "He didn't have a home, as far as I know. Just wandered the streets with his dog. But there was a woman who used to look out for him. She lived in the old apartment building down the block. Maybe she knows more." Ethan thanked him and made his way to the building. It was a rundown structure with peeling paint and broken windows. He knocked on several doors before finding Sarah, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a cautious demeanor. "Jeremy?" she said when Ethan showed her the locket. Her voice cracked, and she quickly wiped away a tear. "I used to give him and his dog food whenever I could. He was such a sweet boy. I wish I could have done more." "Do you know why he spent so much time near the hospital?" Ethan asked gently. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Jeremy's mother was a patient there. She had cancer, and he would wait outside every day, hoping to see her. She passed away a few months before he did. After that, he stayed near the hospital because it was the only place that felt like home to him. Ethan felt his chest tighten. The pieces were falling into place, and the story was more heartbreaking than he'd imagined. Jeremy had lost everything, his mother, his home, and yet he had clung to hope, finding comfort in his loyal companion. Before leaving, Sarah added, the dog was everything to him. He used to say it was the only family he had left. Ethan returned to the hospital with a heavy heart. He now understood why the puppy stayed. It wasn't just mourning Jeremy, it was waiting for the boy's spirit, a connection that neither time nor tragedy could sever. That night, Ethan sat with the puppy outside the hospital. For hours, they remained there, side by side. "I wish I could bring him back for you," Ethan whispered. Suddenly, the puppy perked up, its ears twitching. It stood and started barking, running toward the hospital's main doors. Ethan followed, confused but intrigued. What was it now? The puppy stopped abruptly, staring at a man entering the hospital, a man who looked strikingly familiar. Ethan froze, his eyes widening. The man bore an uncanny resemblance to Jeremy. Was it possible? Ethan's heart raced as he stared at the man who had just entered the hospital. His resemblance to Jeremy was uncanny, the same bright eyes, the same warm smile. But Jeremy had been just a boy, and this man was at least in his early 20s. Ethan shook his head, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The puppy barked excitedly, pulling on Ethan's pant leg as if urging him to follow. Ethan took a deep breath and trailed behind the man, who walked toward the reception desk. "Excuse me," the man said to the nurse. "I'm here to pick up some records for a friend." Jeremy Thompson? Ethan froze in place, his mind reeling. Jeremy Thompson. The same name. The man's voice was calm, but Ethan could hear the slightest tremor in it. The nurse nodded, checking her files before handing over an envelope. "Thank you," the man said, turning to leave. Ethan's instincts kicked in, and he quickly approached. "Excuse me," he called out. The man turned, his expression guarded but polite. "Yes?" "I couldn't help but overhear," Ethan began, carefully choosing his words. "Are you related to Jeremy Thompson?" The man hesitated, then sighed. "Yes, Jeremy was my younger brother." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "Your brother? But how? I mean, I thought Jeremy was dead?" The man interrupted, his voice heavy. "Yes, but I wasn't around when it happened. I only found out months later." The man introduced himself as Ryan Thompson, Jeremy's older brother. He explained that he had been estranged from their family for years, working abroad and trying to make a life for himself. He hadn't even known Jeremy existed until after their mother passed away. When I came back and learned about Jeremy, Ryan continued, his voice breaking, it was too late. He was gone, and all I had left were stories from people who knew him. I've been trying to piece together his life ever since. Ethan glanced at the puppy, now sitting quietly beside Ryan, its tail wagging gently. This dog was Jeremy's, Ethan said. It's been waiting for him outside this hospital every night. Ryan crouched down, extending a hand toward the puppy. It hesitated at first, then licked his fingers tentatively. I heard about the dog, Ryan said softly. I just didn't know it was still here. Jeremy loved this dog more than anything. As they stood there, Ethan felt a surge of determination. Ryan, I think you should see something, he said, leading him outside. Ethan showed Ryan the locket and the spot where the puppy had unearthed it. Ryan stared at the photograph inside, his hands trembling. That's him, he whispered. That's Jeremy. The puppy barked again, as if in agreement. Ethan couldn't ignore the strange feeling that the dog was trying to guide them towards something. I think the puppy's been trying to communicate, Ethan said. There might be more to this than we realize. Just then, the puppy took off, darting toward the alley. Ethan and Ryan exchanged a glance before following. The puppy led them to a spot near the dumpster, the same place where Ethan had found the locket. It began digging furiously again. What is it this time? Ryan asked, crouching down beside the dog. Ethan joined in, helping the puppy clear the dirt. After a few moments, they uncovered a small metal box, rusted but intact. Ethan pried it open, revealing a bundle of papers inside. Ryan carefully unfolded the papers, his eyes widening as he read. These are letters, he said. Letters from Jeremy, to me. Ethan leaned in to read one of the letters. The childish handwriting tugged at his heart. Dear Ryan, I hope you come back soon. Mom says you're far away, but I miss you. I want you to meet my puppy. He's my best friend. I named him Buddy. I hope you'll like him. Please come home. Ryan's shoulders shook as he clutched the letters. He wrote to me, he choked out. He wanted me to come back. And I wasn't there. The puppy whimpered, nuzzling against Ryan's side as if trying to comfort him. Ethan placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. You couldn't have known, he said gently. But you're here now. And maybe that's what matters. Ryan wiped his tears, his expression shifting to one of determination. Jeremy's story isn't over, he said. If Buddy has been waiting all this time, then I owe it to my brother to give this dog a home. To give him the love Jeremy would have wanted. As they stood there, the rain began to fall again, light and steady. The puppy looked up at Ryan with eyes full of trust, its tail wagging. But just as Ethan felt a sense of closure, the puppy barked sharply, running toward the hospital's back entrance. Ethan and Ryan exchanged a glance, their curiosity reignited. What now? Ryan asked. Ethan's heart raced as they followed the dog. I don't know, he said. But I think we're about to find out. The rain intensified as Ethan and Ryan followed the puppy toward the hospital's back entrance. Buddy's barking echoed in the empty alleyway, growing louder as he stopped in front of an old service door. The dog pawed at the door desperately, looking back at them with urgency. Ryan knelt beside the dog, his hands trembling. What is it, Buddy? What are you trying to show us? Ethan stepped forward and tested the handle. It creaked open, revealing a dimly lit storage area. The air was damp and musty, filled with the scent of cleaning supplies and old furniture. Buddy darted inside without hesitation, sniffing the floor as if searching for something specific. Are we sure about this? Ryan asked, his voice uncertain. Ethan nodded. If Buddy led us here, there has to be a reason. They followed the dog deeper into the room. Buddy stopped near a stack of old filing cabinets, barking insistently. Ethan hesitated, then pulled the top drawer open. Inside, he found a collection of old hospital records, thick with dust and disuse. "This can't be it," Ryan said, frowning. "What's so important about these files?" Ethan rifled through the papers, his eyes scanning the names and dates. Suddenly he froze. "Ryan, look at this." Ryan leaned over as Ethan pulled out a file with Jeremy's name on it. The file was marked with a red stamp that read, "Patient deceased, case unresolved." "What does that mean?" Ryan asked, his voice tinged with confusion and dread. Ethan opened the file, and his heart sank as he read the details. The report stated that Jeremy had been brought to the hospital with severe injuries but had disappeared from the ward before he could receive proper treatment. The case had been closed as unresolved, with no explanation of how or why Jeremy had left. Ryan's face paled. He disappeared? That doesn't make sense. How could a child just vanish? Ethan shook his head. "I don't know, but there's something else here." Tucked inside the file was a handwritten note, its edges worn and faded. Ethan unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was chilling. "If you're reading this, you're looking in the wrong place. The truth lies beneath the old oak tree." Ryan's eyes widened. "The old oak tree? There's one just outside the hospital grounds, near the parking lot. Jeremy and I used to play there when we were kids." Buddy barked again, as if urging them to move. Without another word, the three of them rushed outside, the rain soaking through their clothes as they made their way to the ancient tree that stood tall and proud despite the storm. Once there, Buddy began digging furiously at the base of the tree. Ethan and Ryan joined in, their hands clawing at the wet earth. Within minutes, their fingers hit something solid, a wooden box, weathered but intact. Ryan pried it open, revealing a bundle of items inside. Photographs, a small toy car, and another letter. The letter was addressed to Ryan, written in the same childish handwriting as the earlier ones. Ryan unfolded it with trembling hands. "Dear Ryan, I'm scared. A man came to the hospital and said he would take care of me, but I don't think he's a good man. I don't know what to do. I wish you were here. If you find this, please know I love you. Take care of Buddy for me. Love, Jeremy." Tears streamed down Ryan's face as he read the letter aloud. "He was taken," Ryan whispered. "Someone took him from the hospital. And no one even noticed." Ethan placed a comforting hand on Ryan's shoulder. "We need to find out who did this. Jeremy deserves justice." But before they could say more, a shadowy figure emerged from behind the tree. Both men froze as an older man stepped into the dim light, his face obscured by the rain. "Looking for something?" the man asked, his voice cold and mocking. Ryan's eyes narrowed. "Who are you? What do you know about my brother?" The man chuckled darkly. "Let's just say I have a history with this hospital." "And your brother?" "He was in the wrong place at the wrong time." Before they could react, the man turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving more questions than answers. Ryan clutched Buddy close as the dog whimpered softly, his body trembling with fear. "Ethan, I won't stop until I find out the truth," Ryan vowed. "For Jeremy, for Buddy, for all the children this man might have hurt." Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "You're not alone in this, Ryan. We'll uncover the truth together." As they stood beneath the old oak tree, the rain began to lighten, and the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds. It was a new day, and with it came a renewed sense of purpose. Though the journey to uncover the truth was far from over, Ethan and Ryan knew one thing for certain. Jeremy's story wasn't just a tale of loss. It was a story of love, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a boy and his dog. And with Buddy by their side, they wouldn't rest until justice was served.